Universal design and anti-bias teaching practices. So, universal design for learning originated in the 1990s. It was informed by neuroscience research and the original elements of the universal design, which we know the seven elements of equitable use, flexibility in use, simple and intuitive, perceptible information, tolerance for error, low physical effort, and size and space for approach and use. But the universal design core principles have been kind of changed a little bit for universal design of learning. And these core principles include multiple means of engagement, multiple means of representation, and multiple means of action and expression. So, engagement is just having a lot of choice, autonomy, and then like explaining the relevance of the learning, minimizing distractions, communicating, and then fostering collaboration. Multiple means of representation is that like visual, auditory, kinesthetic, mixed methods of learning, providing definitions, illustrations, examples, communicating the big ideas, the background knowledge, and all that. And then the multiple means of action and expression is just like that teach back, grading knowledge, goal setting, development of goals, kind of like offering an opportunity for them to kind of like express what they've learned. That could also be through like practicals and tests. So during COVID, there was actually a study done where surgical education was integrated with simulations, online resources, and telementoring. And these kind of have been used in the past, but they became more essential during COVID. And I thought it was just really interesting to include because it was very like universal design coded. Like it had all these different elements of teaching for these surgical interns. And then it also included self assessment, faculty assessment, synchronous and asynchronous presentations and discussions. And then by incorporating flexibility into curricular design from the outset, the varied needs, characteristics, and environmental constraints can all be addressed, enabling continuation of quality surgical education at this difficult time. That was a quote from like this article. They said that about COVID, but I feel like this can still be like generalized to now. For people that maybe can't come to class all the time or can't um, come to a full-time program, like there needs to be other elements of teaching so that they don't miss out on the content or the opportunity. So inclusion for information systems, this is a like new concept that's gained a lot of ground recently. So it's received significant attention specifically in higher education institutions. And this is basically like universal design includes diversity, equity, and inclusion principles, ensuring individuals of all walks of life can access, understand, practice, and build upon their learning. So going off what I was saying, like giving the opportunity for individuals that can't come to school all the time or can't be in class all the time due to medical, mental, physical, like not being able to be in the same state. Like it could be anything, having to work all the time to provide for their family. So, key themes from like the article that I pulled this from was awareness and understanding about unintentionally excluding students from experiences. So, like you unintentionally exclude individuals that can't afford like school full time, like you're excluding their opportunity to get school if you're not offering scholarships and grants and all of that good stuff. And making it accessible for them to apply to those and get them. And then another theme was roadmap of actions can be adapted and used for various teaching contexts. So this is basically like you taking that awareness and understanding and you're making action, like you're making goals. And then it transforms teaching experiences for both students and professors, increasing engagement. So these students then have buy in, like they've seen you assess the program, they've seen you create action, and like from those goals, there has been like feasible things that they've seen changed, and that includes or that promotes engagement and it promotes buy-in from the students into the program or university as a whole. So, going off of that, we're going to transition to anti bias teaching. I really liked these quotes. So, we contend that medical education needs more systematically trained healthcare professionals to think about how such variables such as race, class, gender, and ethnicity are shaped both by the interactions of two persons in a room and by the larger structural context in which their interactions take place. So then they went a step further and said that they need to, like, curriculum needs to teach that you can not only treat a patient's physical complaints, but you need to recognize how social and economical determinants, biases, inequalities, and blind spots shape health and illness long before doctors or patients even enter the examination room. So I really liked they kind of like fully encompassed and wrapped up all of my thoughts on on like this. And so I really liked these quotes and wanted to share them. So some of the main points of the articles I found were cultural competency versus cultural humility, which I know we've talked a lot about. So like kind of that transition that they're making from competency to humility is a really big thing. Fostering essential conversations about systematic injustices. So, not just saying, oh, there are systematic injustices, or like we all know the systematic injustices, but like calling them out and talking about where they come from and how we can change them, one step at a time with our personal practices, like how we can kind of counteract those systematic injustices that are still here today. Creating and encouraging diverse classrooms and including diversity, equity, and inclusion into the mission and vision of your program or university. That's just like not only you're creating and encouraging, but like you're going out, you're recruiting, and then you're creating a culture within your program or your university to encourage them to stay, like to keep their retention and like care for their mental health and care for their, social and their um what's the word? Their social and their educational health, and keeping that retention. So recruiting and retention within creating and encouraging that diverse classroom. Practice empathy, understanding, and intentional practice with patients and be graded on it. Like during a practical, like be graded on it, not just, oh, like, did they, help that person in a good way. No, like when they were given a like different culture, like did they like show cultural humility through their practices in that case study for that practical? Um, Faculty and staff modeling of behavior, attitude management of microaggressions, and then creating space for different perspectives, acknowledging and learning about systematic injustices, promoting participation in those discussions about DEI topics. So, like faculty and staff modeling the and calling out microaggression, like taking it very seriously. There being consequences, there being talks, not only behind the scenes, but also like in the classroom on a daily basis. And then creating space for everyone to share, like from all walks of life. And then talking like about the systematic injustice, not just alluding to them in the classroom. Key recommendations for leaders to ensure diversity, equity, and inclusion is defined around institutional values and through inclusive conversation. Act with authentic democratic intention, modeling behavior and attitude. Increase diversity recruitment, retention, and representation. That's what I was talking about a little bit earlier as well. Provide resources and incentives for faculty to work towards diversity goals, including multicultural classroom experiences. Provide resources for at-risk students and evaluate their effectiveness, and then cultivate a welcoming and inclusive culture. So at UNC, there was this really cool study done where they took first year medical students and they asked them to participate in a Can We Talk About Race art, like facilitated conversation. So they went to this art museum and they walked through art from different backgrounds, from different artists of all different ethnicities and racial backgrounds. And then they had like a facilitated discussion about it. And 89% of the participants rated the course as very good or excellent. And this is becoming more and more common in healthcare programs. They're providing like art or lived experiences and then facilitating conversations to promote the essential conversation instead of just having, instead of just having like conversations in the classroom about um, these topics. Like they're going out into the community, they're looking at art, they're looking at lived experiences, they're, having these conversations outside of the classroom as well as in the classroom. This was just some responses that they had that was really interesting, caused me to think more deeply about an individual's racial identity. We have such different backgrounds and experiences that shape the way people see stories. Art can be a great way to stimulate conversation while providing distance so people don't feel exposed and uncomfortable. I thought that was a little interesting just because it is like removing um, some of the pressure that minorities may feel to educate. It's not their job, like we've talked about that before, but like the art takes that pressure off a little bit and kind of you can interpret the art and then have those essential conversations through the art, which was very interesting. So I thought that was a cool little study, and it was done right at UNC, so that was close to home. So I chose mental health class to do my application on. So on Canvas, I would add PowerPoints with voiceovers for students to watch and listen outside of class if desired. I would include crash course videos, informational sheets, graphics, like all of the different modes of learning under the correlated modules. And then for assignments, I would include examples because some people don't like just having a rubric. And then in class, multiple breaks appeal to all learners through all different materials, activities to reinforce learning, which I feel like we do pretty good on already. And then creation and sharing of handouts to add to your toolbox, quote unquote. So for different mental health diagnoses, suicide awareness, mental health intervention ideas, just having everybody share out what they've created or what they've kind of come up with. And then assignments and tests and practicals give the option to complete assignments alone or in a group. Encourage presentations to include activities and multiple modes of learning. Grade individuals during practicals based on content, inclusion, equity, and social justice awareness. Practicals include the necessity to pull from those cultural humility practices. Tests can be done in a quiet space alone if needed. Fidgets and earplugs allowed. So that's just like kind of keeping it more like those universal learning. And then I decided to kind of focus on some content too. Like I think every thing we covered in mental health could have had an aspect of like DEI awareness. So facilitating conversations following those contents on diversity, equity, and inclusion, like the increased risk of mental health diagnoses within the Black male population, the increase in the lack of, the increase in the lack of Black women's pain being taken seriously during labor. Like looking at those statistics and then talking about the mental health aspects of it within this class, like talking about the mental health behind the systematic injustices and calling it out, and then talking about microaggressions within the mental health practices. We could talk about microaggressions in general and, the impact on mental health that microaggressions have. But we also could talk about there are certain within the mental health practice, there are microaggressions that can be said by practitioners that we need to be aware of and we need to be ready to call out. So yeah, those are some changes that I would like to make in the mental health class. And then here are my references, and that is it. So thank you for listening.